welcome back to another tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to solve sufficient assumptions in 5 easy steps. Okay, so let's get started. So you can find this example on Preptest 24, Section 2, Logical Reasoning number 10. And it starts off, all material bodies are divisible into parts, and everything divisible is imperfect. Now, it tells you, it follows that all material bodies are imperfect. It likewise follows that the spirit is not a material body. Okay, so let's take a look at the prompt. It says the final conclusion above follows logically if which one of the following is assumed. So how do we know we're dealing with a sufficient assumption? Well, there's key indicator words here that signals to us that this is a sufficient assumption versus a necessary assumption, okay? So a sufficient assumption, it says if is functionally the same as sufficient. If refers to the entire category. So basically it's a sufficient assumption, okay? And then the word assume. So when you see these two words together, you're basically being asked to solve a sufficient assumption. That's basically what this is, okay? So let's hack this thing apart and let's see what we have. All right, so the name of the game for solving sufficient assumptions is basically we have to prove the conclusion. And how do we do that? We do that via looking for a missing premise that when you plug into the argument, it makes the argument valid. Okay, guys? So let's take a look at the template. All right, so the template for this type of question is basically like this. It goes A to B, B to C, C to D, and then we can draw the transitive property going from A all the way to D. And that's what we have here, okay? Just like math. A to B, B to C, C to D. So we can say A to D. And of course, we can flip that and negate that and get the contrapositive. And remember, the contrapositive is like the opposite side of the coin. It has the same functional truth value, okay? So we flip and negate, and so we get not D, not A. All right, so that's the formula, and let's see how this argument conforms to that formula. Okay, so let's take this apart. So what we have here is premise 1. All material bodies are divisible into parts. So all is functionally the same as saying every, any. They mean exactly the same. They refer to the entire category. Okay, so all material bodies. So we can go M, arrow, divisible, D. Okay, and then we flip and negate. So not D, not M. All right, so we're done with premise 1. All right, let's go to premise 2. So premise 2, everything, again, this is an all statement, right? So all is functionally the same as saying everything. If it is divisible, it is imperfect. Anything that is invisible is imperfect. They all mean exactly the same thing. So we can say D, arrow, not perfect. So just not P, and then flip and negate, so you have P, arrow, not D. Okay, so we're done with that. So now it tells you, it follows that all material bodies are imperfect. Let's see what we have. So that's the first conclusion. Okay, so the first conclusion, it follows that all material bodies are imperfect. Okay, so this looks like something that we can derive because it's part of the transitive property. I'll show you how it all fits together in the next slide. Okay, so to diagram this, we can say M, which stands for material body, because remember the word all. So M, arrow, not P, basically not perfect. And the contrapositive is that if it is perfect, then it is not M. Okay, so now let's see how this whole thing fits together. All right, guys. So conclusion 2, I'm sorry. So conclusion 2 tells us that the spirit is not a material body. Okay, so this is the conclusion that we have to basically justify. We have to make this valid somehow. Okay, so to diagram this, we can say S, which stands for spirit, arrow, not material body, not M. And then of course we can derive the contrapositive, which is M, arrow, not S. All right, so now let's put this whole thing together and let's see what we have, guys. Okay, all right, so now we could put premise 1 together with premise 2 and then draw the conclusion down here. So we can go M to D, D to not P. And that's what we have. M to not P. They give us that. So that's not something we need to solve for. However, conclusion 2 is something we need to somehow justify. Okay? So then all of a sudden they give you spirit, arrow, not M. How do we get there? Okay, guys? How do we get there? How do we get to the part where the spirit is not a material body? Okay, we need to justify that somehow. Okay, so something up here is missing. Let's see what that is. Okay, let's start chaining things together. All right, so let's take a look. We can go from M to D, D to not P. That's what we have here. M to D, D to not P. Right? Now, in order to get to this premise, in order to get to this conclusion over here, in order to get to conclusion number 2, where we can derive M to not S, all we need to do is plug in this piece here. P not P to not S. And then you can draw the contrapositive, which is M. Then you can draw the contrapositive, which is M to not S. See, guys? And then we basically prove our conclusion number 2. And then if we flip and negate that, we get S to P to not D to not M. And that's functionally the same thing as drawing the contrapositive. Okay? So the missing part here is the part in blue, not P, not S. Or same thing as if you flip it and negated it, you get S, arrow, P. All right, so that looks like what we need to do. Okay, so this part here is the missing premise. If we plug that in, the argument is perfect. It makes the argument valid. Okay, so let's see what we have here, guys. So let's bring this to the party and let's see what the right answer is going to be. All right, the final conclusion above follows logically if which one of the following is assumed. So we know we're looking for this piece here. We're looking for either not P to not S, or the contrapositive, which is S to P. All right, so let's take a look here. Everything divisible is a material body. Let's see. Divisible is a material body. Do we have that? If it's divisible, it's a material body. Divisible, material body. We don't know that. That's going against the arrow, you see? And that's the fallacy of the converse. That's like saying if A then B, then B then A. You can't say that. Okay? So that's wrong. B, nothing imperfect is divisible, is indivisible. So if it's imperfect, so not P, then it's indivisible. Well, we don't know that. Okay? We only know that if it's imperfect, then it's not a spirit. So that's out. So let's take a look at C. The spirit is divisible. Let's take a look. Spirit is indivisible. We don't know if it's divisible. See? We know if it's indivisible. So C is out. So let's take a look at D. D, the spirit is perfect. Okay, let's take a look. Spirit is perfect. We have that. That is the missing premise. That's the part that's in blue. If you plug that in, you're able to derive S to not M. And that's what we're looking for. See? It likewise follows that the spirit is not a material body. So if we plug this part in, we can follow the chain and draw the contrapositive and say S to not M, which is functionally the same as saying M to not S. Okay, guys? So S to P is the missing premise, and that's what we have here in D. The spirit is perfect. So D is the credited answer. All right, let's take a look at E. The spirit is either indivisible or imperfect. Let's take a look. We know, starting at the chain, starting at S, let's see. It's indivisible. Okay, we have that. But then it's perfect, so you can't say that. So that's incorrect. Okay, you know the spirit is perfect. You don't know if it's imperfect. So that's wrong. So E is out. Okay, so the credited answer is D. All right, guys, so let me go over the 5 steps on how to solve a sufficient assumption. Okay, so step 1. First thing we need to do is ascertain, are we dealing with a sufficient or a necessary assumption? Okay, a sufficient assumption, remember, they'll tell you if, assume, if, enable, something along those lines. If you see a sufficient indicator, you know you're dealing with a sufficient assumption. Okay. Step 2, look for the logical operators. Okay, the logical operators, exactly 4 of them. Okay, so Logical operators are the connectives that tie sentences together. I'm going to do a whole tutorial on this and explain in detail all the different logical operators, okay? But you want to spot the logical operators. This way you know how to translate the statement itself. Step 3, you basically want to isolate the premise from the conclusion, okay? Because remember, for a must be true, we're bringing the conclusion to the party. For an assumption, we're bringing a premise to the party. Okay, the right answer is going to be a missing premise. Okay, that's why it's important to distinguish the difference between a premise and a conclusion. All right, step 4, you want to put it into a standard form. Okay, WFF stands for a well-formed formula. So basically, we'd go premise, 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 conclusion, because a lot of times they'll give you conclusion first, and then you just reorganize the whole thing. It doesn't matter. Okay, so you always want to put the conclusion at underneath the line. This way you know that's what the conclusion is, because all we're doing here is we're just manipulating symbols, and that's all it is. Okay, we're translating, paraphrasing sentences into symbols, and then at that point we're just manipulating it. Okay, so you want to put the conclusion, if they give it to you up front, you want to put it below the line. All right, and then of course we want to prove the conclusion and find the credited answer. In this case, we're looking for the missing premise, and so the missing premise would be the credited answer. Okay, guys? All right, congratulations, QED. Okay, that means we basically prove this whole entire statement. QED basically says that which must be proved, and that's what we did. All right, guys, so don't forget to like, share, and comment, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.